Well, it's Christmas, and for me, certainly, that means revisiting Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, and the man who probably does it better than anybody else is the actor Simon Callow, currently got one-man show on at the Arts Theatre, playing all the parts, including Scrooge. I mean, obviously 2016 has been an extraordinary year. You stick to the literature, but what are the echoes you're picking up as you're performing?
Well, I think that we find ourselves having a lot in common with Victorian England in the sense that there's this huge disparity in income between people and a general sense of a political drift, which Dickens was very familiar with. Dickens was a far from committed Democrat. He thought that democracy had basically failed already in 1843. And so his book is about direct action. It's about really doing something about it, about charity, direct personal charity, personal involvement, and I think that certainly rings a bell.
Have you worked out, there's been all these arguments about, what Queen Victoria or Napoleon would have been. I mean, would Dickens have been a Brexiteer or a Ramona?
That's a tricky one, actually, because he of course, resented and hated what he thought of as Catholic Europe. So he hated Italy, basically, and France, but was very keen on Switzerland. He thought,
well, Switzerland's out, of course.
Well, it is. No, but the interesting thing is that he was a big referendum man. Dickens was a believer in plebiscites. He thought the Swiss system was the ideal one, single-issue referenda. Because, as I say, he had so little faith in democracy. So I don't know what he would have felt about any notion of a United States of Europe.
And when he wrote Christmas Carol, I mean, he was a commercial writer. I mean, he wanted to make money, obviously. But
yeah.
Was he trying to change anything? Was he really trying to sort of wake people up?
Oh, desperately. With that particular book, yes, because he'd, like everybody else, he'd read the parliamentary report on the employment of children in mines, and it had totally devastated Victorian Britain because it was the price of their huge expansion and world dominion, which was only beginning then, which would go on to be much greater. But so suddenly people saw that these children, these desperate, ravaged, feral little children were the fuel of all of that. And so Dickens determined to write, as he said, a hammer blow against it. And oddly enough, he thought, first of all, he'd write a speech, and then the Christmas Carol came up, which is so much more than just that, but at the heart of it, which is the bit that most people forget, is that when the spirit of Christmas present takes his leave of Scrooge, he opens the folds of his garment, and there are these terrible little, as Dickens says, meagre, scowling, wolfish children. One's called Want, and the other's called Ignorance, and the spirit says, beware them both, but particularly beware the boy, because he has that written on his brow which will doom mankind.
And the character of Scrooge and the dead Marley as well,
yeah,
they really did sort of set the tone of how people regard plutocrats, bankers, financiers.
Yeah.
From then on, they're baddies.
I think they were quite baddies before, actually, but he absolutely defined. He's a miser, Scrooge, above all. And the great thing about the story is that it is he, of all people, is given a second chance. He's given a chance to get it right. And that's, I think, what makes it so very moving. He returns to society as a useful member of society and spreads his money around. You know?
And, a lot of sponsorship of the arts, some of it controversial. Do you think they've learnt the lesson that they do need to put something back, or is Goldman Sachs and the rest of it vampire squids? Is that where Scrooge works today?
I fear he does, yes, or did, or would have done. But as for the arts, well, of course, I mean, Dickens believed so passionately that art would heal the community, bring it back together again. He felt that his whole society was diffracted, and he wanted to bring it together. That was his whole life's work, and that also we can't feel other than some identification with.
A lot of people are also saying that, there are even books called this now, that Dickens invented Christmas.
Yeah.
Did he?
I think or there's a sense in which he did. He sort of put it on the map in a new way. I think he gave it meaning, a different kind of meaning. He said, basically, as his character Fred, Scrooge's nephew, says, Christmas is the one time of the year when people open their closed-up hearts freely and look on those below them as fellow passengers to the grave. And I think Dickens's big point was, if you can do it at Christmas, why can't you do it all the year round? Because the Victorians were very big on charity at Christmas, but it was a once-a-year thing.
And some of the trappings as well, the slap-up meals and all that.
Yeah, well, yes, except that remember the great meal in it is the Cratchits, which is a miserable little goose and a tiny little pudding. But what he says is, they make that into a glorious feast. Their imagination does that for them. But the massive banquets, actually, they come from a slightly earlier generation. That's from Washington Irving and all of that. So Dickens is always about the ordinary people and the sanctifying ordinary life.
Now, you are portraying the part, but there have been so many versions of A Christmas Carol. I have to admit, I rather like a Muppet Christmas Carol with Michael Caine. What are your favourites?
Well, I have to go back to Alistair Sim. He conveyed Scrooge as well as anybody, and it's a rather wonderful film with some wonderful and vintage actors. The advantage, if I may say so, of the one-man version is that I can reproduce the fluidity of the book because I can summon up the Fezziwig's Ball in a few phrases and then discard it and move right on to the next thing. Whereas with a film or even a play, you have to sort of physicalise it all.
All right, then, you're going to give us a Christmas treat, a bit of A Christmas Carol. Over to you.
All right, this is where the charity gentlemen come to try to get some money out of Scrooge. They say, Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Do I have the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley? Mr. Marley's been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago, this very night. Well, no doubt his surviving partner represents his liberality. A few of us, Mr. Scrooge, are trying to get together a fund to buy the poor and the destitute, who suffer so terribly at this time of year, food and drink and some means of warmth. Thousands, no, hundreds of thousands, lack for these bare necessities, to say nothing of ordinary human comforts. Are there no prisons? Well, yes, plenty of prisons. And the union workhouses, are they still in operation? Yes, very busy. Thank God, I thought from what you said that something had occurred to stop them in their useful work. Well, Mr. Scrooge, they scarcely offer Christian comfort of mind and body. What may I put you down for? Nothing. But you wish to remain anonymous? I wish to be left alone. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I support the prisons and the workhouses, and if people need them, then they must go there. But many can't go there, Mr. Scrooge, and many would rather die. If they'd rather die, they better do it and decrease the surplus population. Good afternoon. And that's the Scroogian view.
But it has a happy ending, we should remember.
Oh, well, the happy ending is that Scrooge, as I say, is redeemed and goes back to life and spreads it around a bit.
And what does he say at the end?
God bless us, everyone, as Tiny Tim observed.
Simon Callow, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Adam.